Ottawa.
City News Time, 9 o'clock.
News in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 26. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now under a heat warning and feeling in the mid-30s. It's 23 degrees in Ottawa. It's 24 degrees in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We have breaking news this morning. The acting chief of defense staff says the Canadian mission in Kabul, Afghanistan has ended after helping a total of 3,700 people get out. General Wayne Eyre says the Canadians were among the last to leave.
Over the last day, our evacuation operations have ceased, and the majority of personnel departed Hamid Karzai International Airport approximately 8 hours ago. A small contingent remains on the ground to support and coordinate our air bridge for the retrograde of Allied forces while conditions permit.
Eyre says his focus is now on the well-being of Canadian Armed Forces personnel who witnessed horrific things and must now deal with the helplessness and the guilt that comes from leaving people behind.
You know, I have received emails from people I worked with during my tours in Afghanistan who are desperate to get out or get their families out. Their pleas and the photos of the families in terrible situations that accompany many of them are heart-wrenching. They tear at our souls.
Eyre says the horrifying experiences will stay with many of the Canadian soldiers for the rest of their lives. He says this has hit every soldier hard, very hard. His message to the troops: focus on all those you did help get out. It's not clear how many Afghans who helped Canada during its military operation did not make it out of Kabul, but there were 8,000 applications. Now, dire warnings are emerging about a possible attack on the airport in Kabul. Reporter Tom Rivers says an Islamic State affiliate group is believed to be behind the threat.
Britain, for one, saying an attack could come within hours. Belgium saying there was a threat of a suicide bombing. Several countries are urging people to avoid the airport, this leaving many who should be getting out totally in the lurch with just days left before the evacuation effort ends.
Now, the acting chief of defense staff in Canada, General Eyre, says they were making changes literally by the minute to deal with the situation at Kabul airport. Denmark, Poland, Belgium, and Hungary say they've all wrapped up their evacuation efforts as well. City News Time 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Mainly sunny, hot, humid for us today. The high 32 degrees will feel like 40. Slight chance of a shower tonight, cooler low near 16. And tomorrow, sun and cloud, a fresher feel near 24. For today, the high near 32.
And right now, under a heat warning in the area, it feels in the mid-30s. It's 23 degrees in Ottawa, 24 in Smiths Falls. We are under 8 days of this oppressive heat. City News meteorologist Jill Taylor says the heat warning from Environment Canada was first issued around 9 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, August 19th. But there is an end in sight. Temperatures tonight will dip below 20 for a low at 16. The high tomorrow expected to reach 24. By Monday, though, the high will creep back up, the expected temperature 29. Ottawa Fire rescued multiple people from a residential building at 2 o'clock this morning. Several 911 calls indicated smoke in a residential building on Somerset between Bank and Beckingham Private. Firefighters encountered heavy smoke in the stairwell and on the third floor of that building. Residents of at least 2 units have been told they are temporarily displaced. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
it's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And the polls say it's the Conservatives in the lead, and this morning it's pretty much unanimous. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Election polls, forgive me, but they're like crack. Okay, for me, they're like crack. And I need a fix. Join me? Okay, here we go. Nanos, nightly tracking. The Conservatives are in the lead. Conservatives, 34.4. Liberals, 33.6. NDP, 18.9. Strange, because yesterday the narrative for Nanos was that the Liberals were back in the lead because the Liberal attacks on O'Toole about private health care were working. I guess they work for one day. Ecos, nightly tracking, it's the Conservatives in the lead. Conservatives, 32.2. Liberals, 31.4. NDP, 20.5. But in Ontario, the Liberals, according to the Ecos nightly tracking, have retaken the lead in Ontario by 1 point over the Conservatives, 37-36. Main Street Research. The Conservatives are in the lead for the third straight day. Conservatives, 32.6. Liberals, 29.4. NDP, 17.6. I have to tell you, it's been a long time since I have seen the federal Liberals polling below 30%. A long time. Yikes! Yikes for the team in red. Main Street has the Conservatives leading everywhere except Quebec and Atlantic Canada. That's where the Liberals are still in it. Angus Reid went with some different questions for his latest poll. It asked, if you're relying on your gut, if you're relying on your heart, who are you most attracted to? And Jagmeet Singh comes out on top. But Aaron O'Toole is second. And Justin Trudeau is a distant third. And then Angus Reid asked if you are relying on reason or intellectual considerations, who are you most attracted to? And in that case, Aaron O'Toole comes first, Justin Trudeau comes second, and Jagmeet Singh comes third. So maybe it's a question of, does the election come down to how people feel or how they think? Hearts or brains? What will carry the day in the end? So that's a look at some of today's polling data. Had my fix. Meantime, what are the narratives? Surely to goodness. Through the balance of this campaign, with the Liberal team taking on water like this, one of the narratives is certainly going to be this from the Liberals. You have to vote for us, you lefties. The NDP, nice guys, but they're not going to win. And we need to come together and stop the Conservatives. They'd have soldiers in the streets and soldiers in the streets, the Conservatives, and we did not make this up. If you can't stand the very thought of the Conservatives governing Canada again and soldiers in the streets and soldiers in the streets, don't cast your vote for the NDP. That's a wasted vote. Join us. Because we're really just like you, you dippers, in so many, many ways. But the New Democrats are having none of it. These New Democrats, these 2021 New Democrats, they have some new ads. 15 seconds, just tailor-made for social media. And they're not going after the Conservatives. They're going after one person. And his name is Justin Trudeau, and you can't trust him because he'll say anything to get elected. So we have these new spots queued up and ready to go here. The first one is about going after the rich, getting tough on the rich, soaking the rich, taxing the rich. The rich are too rich. And Justin Trudeau isn't doing anything about it because he's one of them. Let's roll tape.
Did you hear that billionaires made like $78 billion more during the pandemic and Trudeau still voted against taxing?
Of course he did. They're his people.
They're his people, as the guy races away in the Lamborghini. Okay, so that's ad number one. Okay. The billionaires. Justin Trudeau's one of them. The billionaires. They're Justin Trudeau's people. And we're New Democrats, and we most certainly are not. The second ad, it features a couple. Okay, you have to picture this. They're coming out of any kind of Main Street pharmacy that you could think of. And the man looks down at his receipt, and he is shocked by the cost of his medications. And who do you blame for that? Justin Trudeau, that's who.
Man, this costs a lot.
Can't wait until Justin puts in pharmacare.
Oh, that's not going to happen. He just voted against it.
But he said he'd do it.
Oh, hon, he didn't mean it.
Oh, hon, he didn't mean it. There, tisk, little one. See, the New Democrats, the Dippers, they know what's at stake in the final weeks of this campaign. They know there's a very real risk that they could watch a lot of their soft NDP support leak over to the Liberals. If strategic voting becomes a big thing, and there's a big move on to stop O'Toole, to stop the Conservatives within the progressive universe. And remember, the NDP, it's in a lot better shape this time around, financially, than it was 2 years ago. I mean, the Trudeau campaign, 2 years ago, the Trudeau campaign had 2 airplanes and a canoe, right? The NDP campaign could barely afford a bus. But this time around, the Dippers have money to spend, and it shows. So, boy, oh boy, it's like, if you're the Liberals, like, boom, 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 boom. You're getting it from all sides. But you know what? They don't do themselves any favors. When one of their junior cabinet ministers is part of a news conference, and she calls the Taliban our brothers. Now, I'm sure you've been following this story. It is lighting up social media. This, so far, is the gaffe of the campaign. This is 2021's blackface, okay? Miriam Montsev, Liberal junior cabinet minister, running for re-election in Peterborough, is part of this briefing yesterday on the catastrophe unfolding in Afghanistan. And she makes this appeal to the Taliban for mercy, basically, and calls the Taliban our brothers. Let's play the clip.
I want to take this opportunity to speak to our brothers, the Taliban.
One more time.
I want to take this opportunity to speak to our brothers, the Taliban.
Okay, just one more time.
Our brothers, the Taliban.
Okay. Brothers, our brothers, the Taliban, our brothers. Oh, brother. So then it comes time for, I know, okay. It comes time for questions during this media event, and Tom Korski, the great journalist with Blacklocks Reporter, he's been on this show. I love those guys, Blacklocks Reporter. He asks Montsev, do you want to walk that back? Let's play the Q&A exchange on that, David.
Frankly, if there's some cultural nuance here, I'm not getting it. I've never heard you refer to a Muslim Canadian member of the Conservative Party as your brother. Everyone is aware of the Taliban's human rights atrocities. It's just a really jarring phrase. Do you just want to walk that back now? Could you just take that back? Or do you really think the Taliban are our brothers?
I think this whole situation is jarring, sir, that there are terrorists taking over my beloved ancestral land. In terms of the terminology, if you go to masjids across the country, Muslims refer to one another as brothers and sisters. So, rest assured, I continue to believe deeply that the Taliban are a terrorist organization.
Okay. So that's the context. She claims it's a cultural reference. Some people are buying that, others are not buying that. Recommended reading this morning is Zara Sultani's column in the Toronto Sun, a complete rebuke of the Montsev talking point. Sultani described by the Sun this morning as a female Afghan refugee, now executive. So it's another hot, sticky, sweaty day. And Liberal partisans are probably sweating more than most and wondering why the heck they called this election in the first place. We're all over the races, local, national. Randall, Denley coming up. Talk about the race in Canada Carleton, one to watch. We're also going to talk about Doug Ford. Randall Denley covers the Ford government for the Post. Doug Ford's at a site. Never quite out of mind, but he's at a site, and the Globe and Mail reports this morning that he has told his MPPs, you are not to be seen with any federal Conservative candidates. Talk about that. Talk about that as well with Lindsay, Maskell, and Andrew Brander. Doug Ford's Disappearing Act. They're going to be here, Ontario politics this week. And during the talkback hour today, between 10 and 11 o'clock at 750-1310, it's 3 election questions. This morning, I want to ask you about what's going on in Afghanistan and how much you blame Justin Trudeau for what's been going on in Afghanistan over the last week or so. Our evacuation effort is over now. It's over. God help the people we left behind. Want to ask you about housing and protecting pensions if a company goes bust. A familiar story in this city with the thousands of pensioners that had to fight for their retirement after the fall of Nortel, and the thousands of pensioners that are still fighting after the failure of Sears Canada. So we'll talk about that during 3 election questions between 10 and 11. All on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
At Lester's Barber Shop, and it was kind of it was one of those things that it was just an opportune time for me to get into it, just because he had decided that he was going to retire after the fire, and then the opportunity presented itself that I could open my own shop. And so I went from a 150 square foot space on St. Patrick's Street to a 600 square foot space just on Beechwood to now here, and I'm in a 1,400 square foot space now. And I don't know, it's been an interesting journey because, you know, you think that you're just going to be just you or a really small space, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got 10 other people working for you, you're in a much bigger space, and even incorporating the boutique. Last March, when all of this started, I mean, we closed down a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I'm going to say, you know, being honest, part of it was social pressure. We shut down before everybody else did, and I'm watching all these other salons, you know, just be really responsible and say we don't want to be a part of the process. So we got ahead of it and closed, and then, you know, the week later, the government's like, everybody's shutting down. And so it was a little nerve-wracking. I guess the first step of us, you know, trying to innovate and just keep moving forward was when the salon is closed, right? It's like, what do you do? Our whole industry is based on being with people, cutting their hair, providing a service. You have to be people together to do that. You can't do that remotely at all. So one of the first things that I saw in our industry, what people were trying to do is they were selling their hair products that they had. And luckily, I've had a website that always had a web store in the back. I just never used it. So as soon as I saw that people were doing that, I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to load up all my stuff. And so that worked out really, really well. And then from there, I managed to find a place that was like a wholesale website that allowed you to have net 60 days. So you don't have to, you can order all the stuff. You don't have to prepay any of it. There's free returns, all that. So that made it really easy for me to bring in other products. and start trying to sell it. And so I went from selling hair products to shave products to bath and body products to a little bit of clothing and jewelry, and now it's just morphed into this whole, like, I want to make it a whole legit boutique. And by December of last year, I decided that this is a full-fledged thing, and we're going to separate it. It's its own company. So it's really finding an opportunity that's there and running with it. So it's been really fun. Our clients are loving it. Our clients that have been here for a long time, they love it.
So keep up.
Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Post-media columnist and author Randall Denley is back on the Rob Snow Show here on City News. Good morning, Randall.
Morning, Rob.
So in your most recent column for the newspaper, you've been writing about the race in Canada Carleton, which you say it will be a winner for residents no matter who wins. Why do you say that, Randall Denley?
We have a relatively rare situation here, I think, Rob, where the Liberal candidate and the Conservative candidate are both quite strong. One of them is going to win it, and I think the riding will get a good MP out of it. As to which party should win, that's to do with a lot more than the candidate's qualities. But they're both good candidates. You don't actually see that very often. It's an open riding, too, so, we're going to see a new face, and I think it's going to be a good one.
Okay, so it's Jenna Sudds and for the Liberals, and the Conservative is Jennifer McAndrew. And you say it's a two-person race, right? It's a two-person race in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the other parties are running, I think, good candidates, but none of those parties are going to win in this particular riding. It's a suburban rural riding, of course, and it's just not a place where those parties are going to connect. So it's going to be down to one or the other. The seat's been held federally for 2 terms by Karen McCrimmon, and it's held provincially by Marilee Fullerton, the PC cabinet minister. So recent history here of going for both parties. So it's a tough one to call, and I think it's going to be a great race.
Okay. Tell me what you like about them, the candidates.
They're both people who've got reasonable experience in life. They both got good education. They have master's degrees. McAndrew has an MBA. Sudds has a master's degrees in economics. Sudds has worked in the government. She's worked in the private sector for business and tech associations. And she's a city councilor. She's still in her first term. But I think it's good when we see city councilors who step up and get into federal or provincial politics, because at least they know something about the issues of the city and how it operates on the ground. And I find that for federal candidates in particular, they don't necessarily know that. That's not where they're coming from. That's not what interests them. And it makes them kind of poor representatives for the nitty-gritty things that we concern ourselves with in Ottawa. So plus points for her for that. McAndrew is an entrepreneur. Her husband, she started a business quite a few years ago. It was an event planning business, fairly substantial. I think they have 17 employees. See a bunch of the trucks parked on Carp Road where she lives. She's lived in Canada and is riding her whole life, got deep roots, really smart woman, clear sense of business, what government should do for business and how it tangles business up in all its regulations. They're both very articulate people. I think whichever way you lean, you can see somebody here you'd be happy to vote for. It was a bit unfortunate in the last riding for Conservative supporters because we had a candidate who something went wrong during her campaign. She wouldn't come to debate. She just kind of disappeared.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
For local Conservative people in this riding, that was a challenge. They might have wanted to vote for the party, but look, the candidate isn't even turning up now before she's elected, so what will she be like after? And I think that had some effect of suppressing the Conservative vote last time in the riding, but they won't see that with this candidate, McAndrew. She's very personable.
For Sudds, this jumping before her first term of council is up, taking the leap and trying to get another gig.
Yeah,
I've taken a lot of calls from callers who are that is very off-putting for them. They view it as opportunistic.
It'll hurt her to some extent. It doesn't bother me. I mean,
okay.
It's political opportunism. Court has this political opportunism, obviously, but politics is all about opportunities. If you're sitting there as a city councillor, you're thinking, I might run federally, but everything would have to align. I'd have to be at the end of my term. The seat would have to be vacant. I'd have to win the nomination. It's one of the reasons why most of them never go anywhere. But I think in politics, when you see an opportunity, vacant seat, viable candidate, if that's the level she wants to serve at, give it a shot. Maybe she'll get elected, maybe she won't. But I don't really begrudge her for stepping up.
Okay. Do you think that riding could be a bellwether?
I think it could, because it's the kind of riding that the Conservatives have to win if they're going to form a government. If you can't win suburban and / rural riding like this one, you're just not going to win. And the election will come down to Ontario as much as we hear about Quebec this and Quebec that. Ontario has 50% more seats than Quebec. So it'll come down to Ontario, and this is a riding they need to win. And they've done very little in Ottawa in recent years. They got one riding, so time to make an impact.
Okay, where's Doug Ford?
Doug Ford was in Northern Ontario yesterday. He's been doing what premiers typically do in the summer. You travel around the province, you announce spending here, spending there, you meet people. His focus, Rob, now is really on his own re-election. It's not on trying to help Erin O'Toole. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think there's kind of an unwritten non-aggression pact between him and Trudeau, too, because if Trudeau wins again, they still have to work together. The last election was silly, with Trudeau spending a huge amount of time attacking Ford as if Ford were his opponent. And I guess, the simplistic thinking is, okay, Doug Ford, he's not popular, so I'll point at Doug Ford and say, yeah, that's what Conservatives are like. Well, he's not doing that this time, and I think that's better. O'Toole's his opponent, so let them go at each other, and so far I think O'Toole's handled everything that Trudeau's thrown at him. Doesn't need Doug Ford's help right now.
Okay, what about this ban on candidates? You don't go door knocking, don't be stumping with federal candidates, and if you do, make sure it doesn't show up on Facebook.
Yeah, it seems a bit over the top in some ways, but really the message is focus on your own job, which is getting our government reelected. His job is not to get Erin O'Toole reelected. I'm sure that group of people would be quite pleased to see Erin O'Toole elected, but it's just not their job. So, already Ford is getting criticized by some people, like, well, where is he? Why isn't he there every day having press conferences? We want constant daily leadership. So I think if he's spending his time, or his key people are spending their time focused on the federal election, that just feeds that fire to the extent that there is one. Say, oh, Doug Ford, he's not doing his job. He should be in charge of the pandemic, and here he is out making speeches for Erin O'Toole and his candidates. So there's really nothing in it for Ford. It doesn't benefit him in any way. So I think his advisors are correct to keep him in the background. He's actually been in the background the whole summer. I think he got overexposed, Rob, because he was there every day doing media scrums on about the pandemic and whatever they wanted to ask him about. It was just like Doug Ford, Doug Ford, Doug Ford. And certainly for some people in the media, it wouldn't matter what Doug Ford says. He's terrible. Isn't it terrible what Doug Ford said today? Put Doug Ford up in Northern Ontario. Well, they're not trekking up there, so you can go and do whatever he likes. I think it just cools his image down a little bit right now. And you see, notice he's let ministers come more to the fore, and in the pandemic, Kieran Moore, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, has been the guy delivering the message, as he should at this point. So I think he's letting other people do more. He's doing less, and I think that's a good balance for him.
Great to hear from you this week, Randall Denley. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Rob.
Yeah, we'll talk next week. Randall Denley is author and post-media columnist. Ontario politics this week is after the news on City News.
The Rob Snow Show, brought to you by Myers Automotive Group.
City News is...
City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 26. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 26, feeling like 34. And here's what's making news right now. Canada's evacuation operation in Afghanistan is now over. 3,700 people managed to get out thanks to Canadian flights. Many more, though, remain in the country. Acting Chief of Defence Staff General Wayne Eyre says Canadian military personnel are taking the withdrawal personally, and many are feeling guilty they had to leave so many behind.
They have witnessed horrific things. They have faced incredible dangers. And the feeling of helplessness and guilt that arises from having to leave people behind can be overwhelming.
Eyre says Kabul airport was under constant threat of attack, and Canada and its allies acted admirably. Day 12 of the federal election campaign. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is in Ottawa at his hotel headquarters, making an announcement and then meeting virtually with supporters in Nova Scotia. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is in Quebec City today, while NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is in Winnipeg and then Kenora. Experts say cases of fully vaccinated people getting COVID-19 does not mean the vaccines have stopped working. Breakthrough infections are rare, even against the more transmissible Delta variant. University of Toronto infectious disease expert Dr. Isaac Bogosh says vaccines reduce the risk of infection, significantly reduce the risk of severe illness or hospitalization, and appear to reduce the degree in which someone is contagious as well. City News Time, 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
It's time once again for Ontario Politics This Week with Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Dalton McGuinty. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Rob.
Great to hear from you. Andrew Brander, senior consultant, Crestview Strategy, former advisor to the Ford government. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
And I hope everybody's beating the heat.
It's been a killer out there.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
What's going on with Doug Ford? What is happening with Doug Ford? I mean, even do we still have that clip of Justin Trudeau mentioning Doug Ford? You know, there was supposed to be this truce, this gentleman's agreement, this ceasefire between Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford. And even I think the Prime Minister broke the rules of engagement here. The Prime Minister broke the ceasefire earlier this week. Let's listen to this clip here, okay?
Even Doug Ford has said that he'll make vaccines mandatory for some essential workers. Look, there are a lot of things Premier Ford and I don't agree on. There's a lot of hard work.
All right, okay. Yeah, okay. So Trudeau mentioned Ford during one of his campaign stops. We have this report from the Globe this morning. Ford has told his MPPs you're not to be seen with Conservative Party candidates, okay? And wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Make sure nothing shows up on social media, okay? Andrew, what's going on, Andrew? Andrew, what's going on?
I think your producer's starting to get a bit of content here that you guys can re-loop into that epic boogeyman Doug Ford reel that you played a few weeks ago. I think that's what that's.
Are you calling us media manipulators, Andrew? Are we media? Should we be labeled as media, branded as media manipulators? Okay, it's a thing now.
I can't wait for the next compilation of latest greatest hits from the campaign trail. But look, I mean, you heard it here first, folks. Last week, I think we talked about how long this truce would last. Clearly, what's surprising to me is actually the one that Trudeau was the first one to break it. And who knew that Justin Trudeau would be more desperate than the premier on this one, but it's likely because he's had a bad week. Look, the premier.
It's amazing what losing 10 points in the lead in Ontario will do. All of a sudden, Doug Ford's name is coming up again.
That's right. That's right. And look, I mean, I think there's an article out today speaking about how the premier is not getting involved in this campaign. We've talked about this for weeks now. So I don't think it's a surprise that we're not seeing him. And his response is quite simple, which is, I have a big job to do. There's a global pandemic going on right now. I am focused on that. With a little bit of a hint that perhaps other leaders should have been focused on that as well instead of going into an election campaign. So I think that is the foundational point here, which is he's going to be head down because there's lots of important issues that need to be focused on right now, not an election campaign.
Right. Well, yeah, he looked hard at work eating the fish sandwich with Greg Rickford on his Twitter account there.
Well, everyone deserves a summer, right?
It's like at the Cass Croûte in Northern Ontario. Okay. Lindsay, what do you think about the Doug Ford and the witness protection program these days?
Well, I would say this. I think that they do deserve a little bit of summer, and it's good to not be confusing things while being out during the middle of an election, and it gives them a little break when they are going to have a long runway with a set election date for this spring. So I do not begrudge a little bit of time off and a little bit of quietness to not to add confusion to electors. But I would say this, if you were refereeing that comment, was there not a little compliment in there of, even Doug Ford agrees with Foley's
accusation? I guess that's kind of even Doug Ford gets it. Yes, okay, and I me and Doug.
He was pointing out something that he thinks Doug supports that we agree on as liberals. So, perhaps as a measuring point of, civility, maybe not perhaps the kindest use of his name, but it was actually pointing out that difference that, in terms of the point of where we stand on vaccination, and that actually Doug Ford stands closer to the Liberals in vaccination than Aaron O'Toole does. So that was the way the name was used. We'll see how this plays out. But, again, I do not begrudge provincial politicians a little mini break before their big show later this year.
All right. Okay. Well, look, it is Ontario politics this week. Bowmanville is in Ontario, so that qualifies. We could talk about it, okay? There's a lot of cross-pollination these days, in case you haven't noticed, between Ontario politics and federal politics with the campaign underway. Aaron O'Toole is just a hard-working guy from Bowmanville. He's the son of a GM worker. Built his own log cabin with his own two hands, okay?
He worked at GM himself as well.
He is doing, though, and this is what I really want to get into this morning. He's doing a lot of outreach to rank and file union members, okay? He's pitching things like workers should have a seat on corporate boards in federally regulated industries. Certainly improved pension protections. If a company like Nortel goes bust, the pensioners shouldn't be the last to get their money. Doug Ford did try the same thing, some measure of success with rank and file union members when he won his election last time out. And just the other day, there was Jerry Dias giving Ford some props on Twitter because Ford was standing up for workers in the de Havilland labor dispute. Could this pay off, this sort of outreach to the blue-collar, lunch bucket crowd, whatever you want to call it, for Aaron O'Toole? What do you think? Andrew Brander, why don't you start there, Andrew?
In addition to the announcements that he's already made that you outlined there, later today he's going to be speaking about a new savings plan for gig workers.
Which gig workers, gig workers,
for CPP premiums. And other job security measures for workers when they need it. As you said already, the seat at the board table is not a insignificant promise. It's something that a lot of unions are looking to that kind of leadership from our federal government, and the Conservatives also have a promise in their platform. This is what's great about having a platform out so far in advance this time, is we know announcements that are coming down the pipe, but to double Canada's worker benefit to a maximum of $2,800 for individuals a year. So these are all O'Toole clearly burnishing his reputation with public sector unions, and more importantly, as I talked about, it comes from an authentic place, which is he can speak to his experience. But it is also, as I said, the burnishing of the reputation, because he's very aware that the Liberals were early on the attack about the fact that he's some big corporate lawyer and doesn't understand people, and what you've
only in it to help the wealthy, to help the wealthy and his buddies on Bay Street and the big corporations, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And what you've seen so far in this election campaign, in all the wedge issues that the Liberals have tried to use to divide and wedge the Conservatives on, you've seen an incredible ability for the Conservative leader to respond to this because of the work that he's done in pre-positioning. I assume, the next wedge that's going to come up, because all the others have sort of fallen flat, is going to be one around the environment. And we know that, the Conservative leader came out a long time ago talking about the need to do more on climate and his own carbon pricing ideas. So this, in line with that, is another way to protect the Conservative leader against unfounded and baseless attacks.
Okay, the outreach to rank and file union members, you think that could pay off for O'Toole? Lindsay, what do you think, Lindsay?
Well, I think I will start with this. First of all, Aaron O'Toole was a Bay Street lawyer, and that's just factual. But he is also someone that is from a union town. And as much as that, as being from a small town in the union family has driven my agenda, the thing that where we come from and our values, the way that drives things, the problem that's going to haunt Aaron O'Toole for that is, of course, the actual Conservative Party and the legacy and memory that union members have of that last year of the Stephen Harper government just attacking unions, wanting to be able to open up all of their books, going after the public sector unions, and just them being the vicious target for a whole year before that election. And that memory and that history and that authentic being of how Conservatives think about unions lives strong in all of those members who are under attack, and they have strong memories of that. So in the same way, he may have some union roots, the roots of the party and the past wrongdoings against unions live strong. So I don't know that that's his best card to play.
Well, yeah, it was just a few weeks ago the Unifor was running attack ads against the Conservative Party, right? So yeah. All right. Did you have anything else to add there, Lindsay, or?
On I actually think that he is. I think it will be interesting, to Andrew's point about the environment. That is the debate I am actually looking forward to seeing and hearing where they stand more on these issues, because there is a real contrast in the offering here. The Liberals are the ones that fought court case, fought all the Conservatives to put a price on pollution, and it was doing the right thing. And there is a big difference in what the plan is and the commitment to follow through. So if people's memories may not be long after a long pandemic to the big fight the Liberals took on the Conservatives, where they were all fighting the price on pollution, but it was the right thing to do. And this, even with the pandemic, it ranks as one of the top issues for voters in this election.
Yeah, that's very much, I think, that is O'Toole's decision to have this carbon tax. We'll see if it pays off for him. I don't know. I think gas is expensive enough. But anyway, my truck is for sale. 9:45. Look, we have to come back. We're going to talk about Peterborough. You called that a bellwether last week, Lindsay. Peterborough.
We're a quiet one.
Okay. Let's see what happens now. Who is the incumbent in Peterborough? Miriam Monsef?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll talk about that when we come back. Ontario Politics This Week. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, you know, and I think I spent 2 days crying. And then I shut my business down for, I think, a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries. Started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and you know, situations change, and you know, when you can't offer hours and hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, you know, and then bringing in more people and recruiting. And anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not. But more so now, because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff. And again, their situations and their circumstances change.
Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Okay, so we're back. Ontario politics this week with Lindsay and Andrew. Well, Lindsay, you said last week that Peterborough was a bellwether riding, and so we have to talk about the incumbent in Peterborough. So Peterborough is Miriam Montsev. She was the MP there. She was part of this briefing yesterday on the catastrophe unfolding in Afghanistan. Our evacuation effort in Afghanistan is over now. It's over now. So she made some remarks and this appeal to the Taliban for mercy for the people still there. And she called the Taliban our brothers. So we have the tape. Let's play the tape here, okay?
I want to take this opportunity to speak to our brothers, the Taliban.
Okay, our brothers, the Taliban. Okay, so that we have to play the question too, okay? Again, this is journalist Tom Korski, Blacklock's reporter. Roll tape. David.
Frankly, if there's some cultural nuance here, I'm not getting it. I've never heard you refer to a Muslim Canadian member of the Conservative Party as your brother. Everyone is aware of the Taliban's human rights atrocities. It's just a really jarring phrase. Do you just want to walk that back now? Can you just take that back? Or do you really think the Taliban are our brothers?
I think this whole situation is jarring, sir, that there are terrorists taking over my beloved ancestral land. In terms of the terminology, if you go to masjids across the country, Muslims refer to one another as brothers and sisters. So, rest assured, I continue to believe deeply that the Taliban are a terrorist organization.
Okay, I think that gives it the appropriate context. Could that be fatal to her campaign in Peterborough? What do you think, Lindsay Maskell?
Well, first of all, I've always said this riding was a bellwether riding because it does have this electoral history that whoever holds that seat in Ontario, that they win government, because it is this interesting riding of urban, rural, ag issues, labor. It has all of the elements that really does make it a deciding factor.
Right.
And I also flagged it because I do think, even as a Liberal, this is a riding where I would have said, this is where we might have a problem with the candidate. So,
oh, really?
She is not, she is not one to have.
She's won twice, though, right?
She has won twice, but she has also had more than one issue on things that have been issues in the media that she has said. And, I realize that she has said that there is a cultural nuance, and I've heard different things from different groups of Muslim friends. So some have said, yeah, that was no problem. Some have said it is a problem. Even though I'm a Liberal, I have a personal opinion, which is, of course, I have family and, family that have married into military families where they have done service in Afghanistan. And so that was a pretty shocking thing to say. Mm-hmm. Nobody disagrees that they're a terrorist organization, but I'm not sure what she thought the benefit was of saying that. I don't think the Taliban are thinking that we're going to listen to Maryam Monsef today. So I think it was a mistake. The leaders were all asked about it, and I actually think everyone was, pretty clear in understanding that we're not going to trample on this any further. Everyone agrees that they're a horrible terrorist organization. We want to do everything to get as many people out as we can, and unfortunately that has ended. But this riding does always have a little bit of something that happens with the news, whether it's Dean Del Mastro or whether... Yeah.
You're right there, Lindsay. You're so right there. You're so right there.
That media issue, it's always going to have some attention, and then it has the perfect mix of all of the issues that would happen of an urban-rural mix of kind of that peak Canadian or Ontario voter that just that is going to be a really, a big deciding riding, and it's a good place to test how issues go over. I'm sure lots of other polling companies test how different policies play in a riding like Peterborough, in ridings like Guelph.
I want to ask Andrew, kind of a different take on it, Andrew. There is this thinking that it's a trap. It's a trap. They want to bait the Conservatives into issues about race and ethnicity, which, I don't know, are they that diabolical? I don't know. What do you think, Andrew, about all of this?
Honestly, I think Lindsay encapsulated the situation perfectly there. I have no doubt that the minister understands Afghanistan more deeply than any of us, and I certainly don't claim to understand any aspects of the cultural references there. I think the point remains that it came off a little tone deaf. I think there were other people, to your question specifically on it being a trap, whether intentional or not. I think there were a lot of people rushing to make comments on it who maybe had second thoughts yesterday. I didn't actually see all that much traffic from Conservative candidates because as I'm doing right now, I mean, I think the comments speak for themselves, and I think it's best in these types of situations, much like when the photos came out of the Prime Minister during the last campaign, to kind of let them do the explaining or let them speak for themselves.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, look, we only have about 2 minutes left. Why are the leaders obsessed with Hamilton? Holy cow. 3 leader visits in 2 days. What's going on? Must be a lot up for grabs in Hamilton. Andrew, Hamilton. Red hot Hamilton. Everybody wants to part a slice of Hamilton. What's going on there?
So not surprised to see the NDP visit the Hammer. The Liberals are obviously making every effort to keep the NDP lunch out there as well. Honestly, though, was surprised to see the Conservatives make a stop there in the first few days of the campaign. Don't forget that Aaron O'Toole is doing this sort of virtual hybrid, so he's spending actually a ton of time in Ottawa. Doesn't have a lot of time on the road, chose to go to Hamilton. And what it says to me is what we were talking about before with the workers' piece. The Conservatives see an opportunity here to build what Aaron O'Toole has called his new Conservative Party. There is an active bidding war going on for the pro-worker, pro-consumer voting market, and he sees opportunities in and around Hamilton to cash in on that.
Okay. Lindsay?
There's also 3 seats where all new candidates, right, in that area, sort of greater Hamilton area and up into the mountains. So 3 seats with no incumbents. So just straight on fight with new candidates. So that makes it interesting. And I think I've also mentioned before, I think there's something really to that media corridor as well, of that stretch along the 403 and the 401, the ridings off of and between those 2 highways down to Windsor, where that's the big media corridor. That's their media corridor as well, and some seats that are open and seats that need to be secured for the Conservatives there. So it is. I think it's both, a media strategy as well as the fact that with those open seats, there's some things in play there for all parties.
Okay, thank you. Talk next week.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. CNBC is reporting breaking news right now. An explosion has occurred outside Kabul airport. That's from CNBC. An explosion has occurred outside Kabul airport. So we are following for the latest details on that. This is City News. We'll be back with the Talkback Hour and 3 election questions right after the news with Andrew Boyle.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 26th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now under a heat warning, it feels in the mid-30s in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 26 degrees. Breaking news this morning, there has been an explosion at the Hamid Karzai Airport in Kabul. The Pentagon confirming the explosion. No reports of injury or death, but the explosion comes just hours after the last Canadian plane took off from that runway. While 3,700 managed to get out on their way to Canada, there are thousands of Canadian and Afghan citizens now stuck in the country ruled by the Taliban. City News reporter Jamie Pulfer with the latest on what happened with the Canadian operation.
A deteriorating situation on the ground in Afghanistan, changing by the minute. And now the Canadian evacuation operation in the Taliban-controlled country is officially over. The final flight leaving the Kabul airport about midnight Eastern time, an airport under constant threat of attack. It means thousands, including those with Canadian passports and Afghans who helped our military and diplomats during the mission there, have been left behind.
It's no surprise this has hit us all very hard, especially those of us who spent part of our lives in that country. My message to the troops who are involved in this operation is focus on those that we got out.
Acting Chief of the Defense Staff General Wayne Eyre says the Canadians were among the last to leave. He says the military evacuated roughly 3,700 people from Afghanistan, which fell to the Taliban earlier this month. I'm Jamie Pulfer.
Now we'll have more on the impact of the Afghanistan mission on the Canadian election coming up in just a moment. City News time 10:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Mainly sunny, hot, humid for us today. The high 32 degrees will feel like 40. Slight chance of a shower tonight. Cooler low near 16. And tomorrow sun and cloud, a fresher feel near 24. For today, the high near 32.
And feeling in the mid-30s now, it is 26 degrees in both Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. With the military mission now ended in Kabul for our country, the crisis in Afghanistan expected to dominate discussions today on the campaign trail. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney with what's expected from Liberal leader Justin Trudeau.
Liberal leader Justin Trudeau will be the first leader to speak today, and as he has on multiple occasions, we're expecting him to begin his remarks with comments about the dire situation in Afghanistan and the latest news that our military mission in Kabul is over. He will likely face questions about whether more could have been done and the thousands of people we're leaving behind who are still looking to flee the country. Other party leaders like Conservative Erin O'Toole and the NDP's Jagmeet Singh have criticized the government for not moving quicker and not devoting more resources to help people evacuate the country. But Acting Chief of Defense Staff General Wayne Eyre addressed some of the criticisms of the evacuation efforts during his news conference.
Operational details of what we were doing had to be kept quiet. So into that silence, some people interjected their own narratives without any real knowledge of the facts, adding to the confusion.
Aside from Afghanistan, expect the Liberals to make an announcement on seniors. Conservatives are making an announcement in Ottawa, while New Democrats take their tour to Winnipeg to talk housing and later make an announcement with First Nations leaders. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News time at 10:04. Add another voice to the growing call for the provincial government to have a vaccine passport. Peel Region's Dr. Lawrence Lowe says he's looking into what could be done locally to create that certificate program if the province doesn't implement one. More on this subject locally coming up with the Rob Snow Show just after 11 o'clock. And a summer-long crackdown on those not following rules of the road has now laid 2,050 charges. Vast majority of these by Ottawa police are for speeding, 1,103. Stunt driving, that's going 50 over the limit, resulted in 142 tickets. Those charged with distracted driving, 70, lose their car to the impound for 14 days. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
With 3 election questions. So let's get right into it. These are today's 3 election questions. Do you blame the Liberals for the current mess trying to get Afghans out of Afghanistan? The evacuation effort over now. Or do you put more blame on the American administration, Presidents Biden and Trump? That's question number one. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Okay, question number one. Question number two, do you agree or disagree with this promise from some of the parties to ban foreign home ownership in Canada in an attempt to cool the housing market? Conservatives promising this. Then the Liberals came along. They promised it too. Same thing, 2 years. The Democrats are not promising this, but I want to know if you agree or disagree with it. What do you think about it, okay? And question number three, do you agree or disagree with the promise to better protect, those are the politicians' word, private sector pensions for workers when businesses go bust? So those are today's three election questions here on the Rob Snow Show. We have several lines available right now, and the Prime Minister is campaigning in Chicoutimi, Quebec right now. He was expected to make some kind of comment about the situation in Afghanistan, and he has yet to say anything about it. And he has yet to be asked about it. So while we wait for some calls at 750-1310, 750-1310, and three election questions, let's listen a little bit to the Prime Minister here. Chicoutimi, Quebec.
So, of course, we have environmental preoccupations. We have worries about social license for this project. But as I've said, we're interested in looking specifically at the elements that are public transit for that project. And we're waiting for Quebec to give us a final project proposal as well.
Prochaine question. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Catherine Lévesque, la presse
canadienne. Canadian Press. I want to continue on this because yesterday you did say that you would be a partner with the British Columbia government for the George Massey Tunnel. Of course, you have to upgrade it, but it's still a tunnel. It's a small part, perhaps, of public transport. So why is there a doublespeak here? Why did you take two different positions? Well, first, they're different projects. The third link is a totally new project. It doesn't exist at the moment. And people have environmental concerns about it. And also about social license, as I said. We're interested in looking at this in terms of public transport. And we're waiting for Quebec City to give us a tangible, specific project.
This incredible day.
And then we can take a decision.
For Canada, for Afghanistan, and I'm just watching here. Not a word. Just as though it just has not happened. It's not happening, or we're choosing to ignore it. Okay. And you heard our parliamentary reporter, Cormac McSweeney, right on the money. Everybody was expecting the Prime Minister to come out in Chicoutimi this morning and talk about the situation in Afghanistan. His event was delayed. It was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. It started about 20 minutes ago, so delayed. The thinking being, well, they're getting their talking points lined up. But so far, nothing, no comments on what has happened today in Afghanistan. The evacuation effort has ended and people have been left behind. They have been left at the airport. And I understand in Chicoutimi, they're talking about Quebec issues and Quebec infrastructure issues. And his announcement is about support for seniors. So I don't know. It's odd to me. I'm sure there's a method to the madness, and maybe I just don't understand it. But we've been doing this every Thursday during the Talkback Hour, 3 election questions. And I want to know, how much do you blame the Liberals for the current mess? Trying to get Afghans out of Afghanistan, or do you put the blame more on the American administration? President Trump signed a peace deal with the Taliban, and Joe Biden has largely stuck to it and pulled Americans out of there, and the Taliban had the run of the place in the matter of a week. So how much of this is Justin Trudeau's fault? Do you agree or disagree with the promise to ban foreign home ownership in Canada? Two parties promising that now in the election, the Conservatives and the Liberals. But do you agree with it? Do you agree or disagree with the promise to protect private sector pensions for workers when a business declares insolvency? 750-1310, David's in the West End, and you're on City News. Good morning.
Hi, Rob.
Hi there.
Rob.
Yes.
It's the Americans' fault.
It's the Americans' fault. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
But Biden was welcomed into the club. You remember we spoke about this some time ago.
Yeah, you told me about that.
I told you about that.
Yeah.
And your friend Jeffrey actually said on Monday that the Americans have got a handle on it now, or something to that extent.
Oh, I don't
wrote
think
it
so.
Down.
Yeah. Oh,
and Trump's plan wasn't used, not one bit of it. On Fox, they're telling us little bits about the plan that Trump had, and it doesn't come anywhere near what's actually happening on the ground now.
Right. Okay. So how much of the blame does Trudeau get for all of this?
Well, he's part of the club.
He's part of the
gets
club.
A lot of blame.
Okay.
You know, and he loves China. And I mean, China are already making investments.
Okay. I'm just going to let you. I'm just going to let you go, David, because he's finally talking about Afghanistan now. Let's listen here, please.
Over as of today. What's your message to the people who are counting on Canada's help to get out of there and didn't get it?
First of all, this is a very difficult day, not just for Afghans, but for people around the world, including in Canada, who have long been deeply committed to the Afghan people and a better future for Afghanistan. The temporary air bridge that was put in place by the Americans over the past number of weeks allowed us to get out tens of thousands of people as an international community, and Canada will have been able to lift out about 3,700 people. We have taken as much, if not more, advantage of this temporary opportunity than any country, just about any of our allies. And I want to thank the Canadian Armed Forces and our diplomats and our hardworking immigration services people who have made that happen. But I do take issue with you saying now that our engagement with Afghanistan is done, Glenn. Our engagement with Afghanistan is not done. Yes, this phase of the emergency air bridge, facilitated by the Americans until they pull out finally, has been important and has been something we've been in wholeheartedly over the past many weeks. But our commitment to resettle over 20,000 Afghans in Canada in the coming months and years, our work to continue to support people in the region, our continued work to put pressure on the Taliban alongside our international allies to allow people to leave Afghanistan and come to safety in Canada will continue. This particular moment is done, and it's heartbreaking to see, but there is much more to do, and Canada will continue to be there for Afghans and the Afghan people.
Okay. So obviously that's what they've been working on. This is how we're going to respond when we're asked about it, but apparently only when we're asked about it. Okay, Matthew Almont, good morning. Matthew, you're on City News. Hi there. On the Afghan situation, the evacuation effort is over. How much of the blame does Mr. Trudeau get for this, in your opinion?
As much as I would like to blame him for more, I don't think I can.
Okay.
I think there's plenty of blame to go around.
Right.
I mean, there's been how many administrations that could have done more against the Taliban problem? Then there's their own military that couldn't seem to keep them down. And but the current situation, without the transportation of getting, allies and Afghan people who want to get out, I can blame a lot of this on Trudeau. He had apparently months to get ready to start and didn't. So he really should be ashamed of himself. We all should be ashamed of him and ashamed of ourselves for voting him in.
Okay. So it is 3 election questions, so I do want to ask you about the other 2, if you don't mind. The ban on foreign home ownership in Canada is something that's being promised by both the Liberals and the Conservatives, a 2-year ban. They try to cool the housing market, end some speculation. What do you think about that?
I can support it I'm not 100% sure if these people are just buying like a vacation home. I don't have a huge problem with it.
Okay.
if there are people who just want a mailing address for whatever reasons.
Well, it could be any number of reasons. Could be those reasons. Could be an investment property, speculating that the price is going to go up. In British Columbia, it's well documented now, one of the problems in British Columbia is real estate is used to launder money for international organized crime.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. So, okay. What about this promise? The Conservatives are promising that pensions would be better protected if a company goes bust. Here in Nortel, we had Nortel went bankrupt, of course, and the pensioners, it took them 7 years, and I think they got something like 60 or 70 cents on the dollar, something like that, after 7 years, right?
Sure.
So the Conservatives are promising to certainly improve that situation with pensions. What do you think about that?
I'd support it.
Yeah?
I mean,
okay.
If there are people who've been working, decades, investing so much of their time and energy in a company, and it just goes under. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons why that happened, but if they didn't see it coming, I mean, I don't think they should lose everything that they invested. So I think at a certain point, maybe we can help them get something back. I don't think maybe 100%, but at least get something back. I mean, I think they kind of earned that.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. We're going to run here, 750-1310, 750-1310. We're doing 3 election questions. We're listening to Mr. Trudeau is taking some questions now on Afghanistan. We'll be right back on City News.
The food cupboard started about 25 years ago. Again, it was a very small operation in the basement of a church. And we have been expanding to the point where we needed to have a new facility. So in discussion with the city of Ottawa, and Jan Harder, the local representative here, we came to this location, which is about 2,000 square feet, located in the Walter Baker Center. We've been here for about 2 years, and it is much better. It gives us a much broader opportunity to serve our clients better. It's a fairly affluent community in Barrhaven, so you wouldn't think that people would really need to have a food bank or a food cupboard. But people sometimes have a temporary loss of their job, maybe new immigrants or refugees to the community. Maybe there's been an injury in the family or something like a pandemic that causes people to run short of food during their monthly requirements. So we offer any clients who come and live in our catchment area the opportunity to pick up an order of food every 3 or 4 weeks. The need varies from time to time. We have expanded our offering to include quite a few perishables, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, vegetables, fruit, but people I think know that we need cans of beans and stuff as well too. One thing that we're consistently short of sometimes is personal hygiene products. You go to the grocery store, you buy your toothpaste and you buy your deodorant and shampoo there. People don't automatically think that to donate those kinds of things to a food cupboard. So we end up buying quite a few of those things from time to time. The pandemic has affected us like it has everybody. Initially, we had to stop the grocery store food donations so that we didn't have any risk of contamination and to have a significant number of volunteer work to be done in our facility. We have a storefront, so it's like a mini grocery store where you take a cart and you go around and pick out the things that you want. That doesn't work during the pandemic to maintain social distancing and so on. So what we have now is our clients can come in one at a time, they make an appointment, they stand behind a line, and they direct our volunteer to, I'd like Kellogg's cornflakes rather than Harvest Crunch, to pick the food that they would like off the shelves according to the allocation, depending on the size of their family. And then they take it out, load it into their vehicle or whatever, bring back the cart, we disinfect everything, and prepare for the next client. We are very blessed here in Barrhaven. We're a totally volunteer organization. So if you give a dollar to us, it goes to purchasing food or to provide some service to our clients.
right back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
3 election questions. How much do you blame the Liberals for the current mess of trying to get Afghans out of Afghanistan? You put the blame more on the American administration, President Biden, President Trump. Question number 1. Do you agree, this is question number 2, agree or disagree with the promise from the Liberals and the Conservatives, not the NDP, to ban foreign home ownership in Canada for a period of 2 years in an attempt to cool the housing market? And question number 3, do you agree or disagree with the promise to better protect private sector pensions for workers when businesses go bust? Think Nortel, think Sears Canada. Okay. Who's been waiting the longest here, David? Is it Joanne? Yeah, Joanne? Okay, let's take Joanne's call. In Orleans, you're on City News. Good morning.
As far as Afghanistan goes, I lay equal blame on both governments, equal in the sense that we have been allowed ourselves to be overly dependent on American strength. And now with their elected imbecile in power, we've been left victims of his stupidity. So had we had the resources and the wherewithal from decades of ensuring our forces were well equipped, we may have been able to undertake something more vigorous and for longer. It's very important to understand that the Canadian public isn't looking at this in terms of weeks. I heard the Prime Minister say, for the last few weeks, for us, we see the government as having had months to execute this, so there's no excuse.
Okay.
Banning ownership, yes.
Foreign home ownership for 2 years, yeah.
Yes, there's a whole thing about illegal and money laundering and the way the criminals have infiltrated our easy access to home ownership. So perhaps that will help. I still think home ownership is still something for the municipalities to reduce the cost of buying houses.
Well, yeah, the red tape regulations it's going to be very hard for a federal government to make any headway in the housing market, say locally, like here in Ottawa, without changes in the mindset of the Ottawa City Council, for example, right? Yeah,
and an end to
Joanne, it's such a good point that you make. And in Toronto, they have 2 land transfer taxes, for crying out loud, right?
No, it's not all consumers at the foot of consumers here and the craziness. It isn't. It really is.
It's an excellent point. And on pension protection.
Yeah, well, I think we need to understand that unbridled capitalism is as bad as communism. And left to its own devices, capitalism doesn't care about people any more than communism does. So this would put a spear right through the heart of those who are saying communism, socialism is better for you. It's about time we have pension protection. The understanding that the employee is a huge contributor to the wealth of the owner. And those owners of small companies who do treat their employees with respect and the idea that, you have built our reputation, you have built our company, like those employers, owners.
Oh, I think we lost. Beep, beep. Time to go, Joanne. Thank you. Good points, though, as always. Patrick is in Low, Quebec, navigating the 105 up there, I guess, in Low, Quebec. Good morning, Patrick. You're on City News, sir. How are you listening to us? Are you on FM or are you on the app? Or
No, I'm on FM and I'm parked on the side of the 105.
All right, good. And we're coming in okay up there?
We're coming in okay.
Absolutely.
Temperature is absolutely amazing.
Good stuff. Okay. On Afghanistan, sir, this terrible situation in Afghanistan, how much of this is Trudeau's fault, in your opinion?
First off, hearts goes out to anyone that's there, the Canadians that are trapped, the Afghanistans, everyone. I view this a bit differently. I'm not looking to blame anyone. I think it does, raise a serious questions around the state offering everyone security. And it is a clear manifestation that the state, when it is pushed to extremes, will choose sort of an opt-out. And Trudeau's comments are disingenuous. He said that we're not pulling out and all of that. Well, he should tell that to the people that are there right now that will probably lose their lives. And I think that is just a horrible way to spin it. And if you make that bridge to domestic policies, you know, security is the guiding principle that we're hearing left, right, and center with the lockdowns and things like that. You know, tell that to the people that have been deemed unessential. Tell that to the people that have lost their jobs. Tell that to the people that are now completely dependent on the state because they're receiving checks. I think Afghanistan is something that we see that we can't explain. And what I'm offering here is maybe a question to say when you think or accept that the state will provide you security and you have to basically let go of your liberties, then you ultimately lose both because the state can't.
All right. Okay. So, look, very quickly, because we only have a minute or two left here.
Of course.
On banning foreign home ownership, this is something that the Liberals used to say to Conservatives and other parties and other people, look, if you support something like this, you're racist. And now they're promising it as part of their platform. So what do you think about it?
That's a complicated issue. And again, I think if you position it that way, you can probably come up with a reasonable, perspective. I look at it, this is a byproduct or an unintended consequences of a monetary policy. Unfortunately, credit has been flowing everywhere. And whenever we have a problem, it's programs, and just pushing money in it. And the people that get the money first
then let's skip to the third one then. What about pensions? What, the company I work for goes bust, I lose my pension. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, but they go bust. Why? Well, they go bust because they can move their operations to another place to be able to, produce at cheaper costs. And again, this is the unintended consequences of well-intentioned policies, but unfortunately, it hits the most vulnerable. It's like inflation, right? Okay. Prices are going up right now. Where it matters most, it goes up in food. And people are out there, and they're not getting, an inflation-adjusted pension, and so they're getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And this is the byproduct of an increasing presence of government within our lives. You've got programs everywhere to help.
Thank you, Patrick. I got to run because we've hit halftime already on the Talk Back Hour on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 26th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, feeling in the mid-30s in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 27 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. An explosion has gone off at one of the main gates to the Hamid Karzai Airport in Afghanistan's capital. No word on injuries. It comes just hours after the last Canadian military flight took off from that country, with people headed for Canada. An update this morning from the Canadian military operation in Kabul outlined 3,700 people altogether were taken from that country, with Canada as the final destination. The acting chief of defense staff says military personnel are heartbroken they could not stay longer and help more people get out. General Wayne Ayers says they feel guilty so many had to be left behind. There are 678 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today. 15 of those cases are in Ottawa. 10 are in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. There's one new case in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. No new cases in Renfrew. The province reporting no additional deaths. Over 27,800 tests were completed. The positivity rate is at 2.8% today. A clarification on a couple of issues this morning which disrupted the LRT in Ottawa. Around 6, there was a coupling issue between two of the cars. It brought the train to a stop at Lyon Station. That was corrected. Around the same time, though, a train at Blair Station had a heating and cooling issue. Both of those trains were sent back to the yard for maintenance. Line 1 is operating now with about stops every 5 to 6 minutes. 10 trains are operating. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Talking about 3 election questions. How much do you blame the Liberals for this mess trying to get Afghans out of Afghanistan? Do you put more blame on the American administration for the decision by President Biden to follow through on the withdrawal that was originally part of President Trump's administration? Or do you put the blame on Mr. Trudeau and his government for not planning earlier, not moving faster? I'd like to know where you are on that. That's question number one. I guess it's like 3 question number ones. Do you agree with the promise to ban foreign home ownership in Canada? That was a no-go for the Liberals for a long time. Now they're promising it after the Conservatives promised it. The New Democrats are not promising it. And I'd like to know your thoughts. Do you agree or disagree with this promise to better protect private sector pensions for workers when businesses declare insolvency? This situation in Afghanistan, it is a sad day. It really is a sad day for this country. A terrible and tragic day for the Afghans who were there for our Canadians when we needed them. Much blood and treasure spilled by this country in Afghanistan. The warnings were there, and according to media reports, it's over now, and people, they're being left behind, and it's unbecoming, I think, of the Liberal machine to be in full campaign mode because of this early election. Instead of giving this file its complete attention. Now, I've heard it said in the last few days, don't worry, Rob, the government can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can have an election and deal with an international crisis at the same time. But you know what? There's an old line in politics. Perception is reality. And I think for a lot of Canadians who've been paying attention to this issue, the perception is not a good one. The perception is Afghanistan's a catastrophe while the Liberals are trying to orchestrate a power grab at home. Now, I don't know if any of this is going to impact the outcome of the election. Foreign affairs, it's often been said, foreign affairs doesn't decide elections. And then you have the spectacle of Montsev. Let's play the tape again here. Miriam Montsev calling the Taliban our brothers.
I want to take this opportunity to speak to our brothers, the Taliban.
I still can't get over that. The blackface gaffe of the election. Let's play the question from Tom Korski from Blacklock's reporter and her explanation that it's a kind of a cultural reference. Play that, David.
Everyone is aware of the Taliban's human rights atrocities. It's just a really jarring phrase. Do you just want to walk that back now? Could you just take that back? Or do you really think the Taliban are our brothers?
I think this whole situation is jarring, sir, that there are terrorists taking over my beloved ancestral land. In terms of the terminology, if you go to masjids across the country, Muslims refer to one another as brothers and sisters. So, rest assured, I continue to believe deeply that the Taliban are a terrorist organization.
Okay, that's good. Zara Sultani has a column in the Toronto Sun that puts the Mount Sev remarks in a very different light. Encourage you to read it. Okay, I don't know if that's going to stick to the Liberals or whether it's going to get a pass. CBC, it's like it didn't even happen at the CBC. It certainly lit up Twitter, though. Twitter, I get Twitter's not real life. People are angry on Twitter every minute of every hour of every day. But last Canadian flight out of there. Done. Anyway, let's get back to the phone. Sean in Ottawa, you're on City News. Sean, good morning.
How you doing? Yeah, it's John, actually.
John, sorry, John.
No worries.
Yeah. On the situation in Afghanistan, how much of this is Trudeau's fault, in your opinion?
100%.
100%, okay.
Yeah, we're not American. So we can pass the buck. It is an international job. However, under Canadians, we had a commitment to our Canadian interpreters and their families.
Yeah.
Contingency plans should have been put in place as soon as Trump announced the American withdrawal. This could have been seen months in advance. People's locations could have been identified. Mm-hmm. We could have started shuttling.
Should have mobilized the evacuation much earlier then, right? Yeah.
Months ago.
And we spent more than a decade in that country, right? You'd think we'd have a handle on what's going on there on the ground. But I don't know. It seems to have caught everyone who should have known completely unaware and entirely unprepared.
I'll give you how unaware. I just wrote a letter for my interpreter that he needed to get his family out of Afghanistan. I was a sergeant major over there, and he worked for me directly. He's now in Canada. His family's in peril. And they notified him 4 days ago that he needed a memo from me to verify that he worked for us. That's how unorganized this is.
Needed a memo from you.
Correct.
Oh my God.
And I can email you the copy that I sent him. That's correct. He needed a memorandum from me to get permission for his family to leave Afghanistan and verify that he did actually work for us.
How long ago do you think we could have started getting people out of there? I mean,
3 months ago.
3 months ago, yeah. Okay.
Guaranteed. Yeah. So Mr. Trudeau is at fault. Contingency plans would have been made by the military. And I give credit to General Air. I know him. He's a great man. And he would have had contingency plans put in place. We have the intelligence officers to do that. Now, what action would have been taken would have been strictly political after that. It's not up to the military. We just provide plans, and then they tell us what plan we're going to implement. Your second question on the housing market.
Banning foreign home ownership in Canada for 2 years. If you're from another country, you can't buy a house in this country for 2 years.
Trivial
That's stuff.
Trivial to the housing market crisis. Blind bidding, definitely causing a crisis in Canada. Second of all, the supply and demand of lumber has increased the cost of building a house here just for construction workers and people that rely on that industry to make a living, to make that living. Government should have stepped in earlier to make sure that price gouging didn't happen with said lumber, and where a sheet of plywood that was $25 went to $100 a sheet, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Let's on firming up some of the rules about pensions for workers. The business goes bust and the pensioners are, they wait years and get pennies on the dollar. What do you think about should be done there?
Okay.
That should
in
be
my
fixed,
opinion,
right?
again, the pensioner is not at risk with the employer other than his job. If he doesn't provide the services that are required, he loses his job.
Yeah, but the pensioner's contributed to his pension or her pension plan, right?
The whole time. The whole time. Yeah. And I agree that the pensioner should not lose a cent. They should be the first ones paid out. Any corporation that took the risk of investing into the other corporation or bank is the one that is responsible. If the company was not meeting its status quo and had to close, or bankruptcy, insolvency was present, or the risk was there, they took that risk to make money. The pensioner did not. The pensioner deserves his money first and foremost.
All right. Great call, sir. Thank you for your insight. Just hang on the line. David's going to give you his email address, my producer, okay? Thank you. Thank you, John. Yeah. Carl. Good morning, Carl.
How you doing?
I'm good, Carl. How are you?
Good.
On the situation in Afghanistan, how much of this is Trudeau's fault?
Well, let's start off with, I'll be brief. This is a 2-decade American debacle. Our MPs in Ottawa, all of them, should have convened 4 months ago and then decided to put a plan together at that time to get these people out.
Okay. They didn't do that.
No, they didn't. And it's just, we got a problem with our world leaders. Look what's going on around the world. They're not taking care of their people.
Okay. Anything else to say on that one, sir? Okay, on housing, okay. The Conservatives were first out of the gate with their platform. We are going to ban, if you're from another country, you're not going to be able to buy a house in this country anymore, and you're not going to be, well, at least for the next 2 years. And then the Liberals kind of followed through on that and promised the same thing. The Democrats are not promising that. They're promising a big tax on foreign homeowners instead.
Right.
So
it's the same as usual. They don't say anything until election time.
Right.
These things have to be thought out for the people.
Yeah.
And give them a way out.
Okay.
And by all these numbered companies coming in and, there's no face to who's buying these.
Yeah.
And then the fact that the provinces and the federal government need to get together on a plan and have specific policy laid out.
Yeah. And the municipalities, sir.
Well,
you don't build a house without dealing a lot with your local municipality, right?
True, but they're not the one that regulated. RICO regulates it because the province makes the policy, RICO administers it, and they have terrible, weak policy and legislation for it.
All right, okay. And on pension protection, I mean, when Nortel went bust in 2009 and had 20,000 pensioners, it took them 7 years. Some of them only got 50 cents on the dollar after a 7-year fight, sir.
Right.
The Sears Canada people, you have 17,000 pensioners. They haven't had a dime yet. They haven't seen a dime yet. They're still fighting for their pension.
Again, this is just flat out an easy logistical problem. The money is deposited into a separate account that nobody can touch, only the pensioners when and if they decide to take their money out of it when they retire. The businesses can't touch it. It's not their money. They're contributing to it, but it's for the worker. It should be separate, so no one can put their hands on it regardless.
All right. Thank you. Great call, sir. Great calls today. I'm loving the conversation today. It's 10 coming up to 10:45, so we better stop. A couple of lines available there. I'd love to hear from you. We're doing 3 election questions on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This hour of
So the birth of absinthe was 2002, I think, 2003, and I was working at Urban Bistro, happily, where Allium is now. And then the space where Holland Cafe was came up. It's on the corner of Spencer and Holland. And I spoke to the landlord, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of other people, but he and I just, got along super well, and he put a lot of faith in me. So Carmen Turner is his name. He gave me the lease to the place and really pretty much gave me all the equipment in the place. I was really lucky. I've been really lucky with landlords that way, actually, both my current landlord and Carmen Turner. Because if there hadn't been Carmen Turner, there wouldn't have been absinthe. So we were there for a few years and just sort of outgrew the place. And then now we're here. It's obviously been tough, and it's been tough for everyone. I mean, that's been the big democratic sweep of like in restaurants and the hospitality and the arts that we were talking about earlier. It's like everybody's been impacted pretty much the same. From everybody that I talked to, we're down 80%. We're climbing out now. I think one of the saddest things is like we went down to 2 employees from 25, and we're now at 4, and we're bringing 2 new people on this week, so we'll be at 6. So it's little steps. So it's been tough. It's I've got the most expensive clubhouse ever here, because some days you come and you don't do any business, but you're here. But I'm grateful for what I do have. I think everybody's optimistic now, not necessarily just about the vaccine, but about like the vaccine, spring, being able to be outside. I think you're going to see a lot of like pop-up things happen in parking lots and on sidewalks and all, and like that, rather than being actually inside somebody's commerce. I think we'd like to take it outside. I know my staff would. My staff like the outdoors now. All of a sudden, all 4 of us, 6 soon. But we'll be doing some business in the patio in the parking lot, and we have a patio out front. And I think I hope other restaurants and stores will do the same. I hope that they take advantage of like the sidewalk and doing sort of, guerrilla marketing and stuff like that, and really shaking it up a bit. You can find us at Absinthe Cafe at 1208 Wellington Street West in Hintonburg, and you can find us online at absinthecafe.ca.
Say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Doing 3 election questions. This mess in Afghanistan, how much of this is Trudeau's fault? That's question number 1. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with this promise to ban foreign home ownership in Canada for a period of 2 years, being promised by the Liberals and the Conservatives, trying to prevent some of the speculation that's happening in the housing market? Do you agree or disagree with the promise to better protect private sector pensions for workers when businesses go bust? Tim in Ottawa. Tim, you're on City News. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great, sir. This situation that's unfolded over the last 2 weeks in Afghanistan, how much of this is the Trudeau government's fault, Justin Trudeau's fault?
First off, it's very disappointing. It is disturbing to see, but for me to comment on that, if you would, I would not know who to point the finger at, but somebody, we need a solution there. That's for sure. And I don't think one single person is to blame. I think your previous gentleman in the military that spoke to callers before, I think his comments would probably sum it up best. He seems to have a lot of background. The fact that he needs a memorandum.
Seems to know what's going on. Yep. Okay,
if I may, on
yes,
the housing side.
On the housing, yes.
So, I mean, the foreign ownership, that's not the issue in Canada or anywhere. The issue is the supply and demand. There's not enough supply, and what's holding up the supply is the bureaucratic process across the board in many municipalities. The added cost that it costs developers to get property going and to get it built up. When you get a small group of people that can cause so many delays, and just by saying whatever, it doesn't matter what they say. Look at the Lansdowne project in the Glebe, how one small group was able to add so many costs to the development process.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And those
I was told by someone who works in a very high position for a very well-known local developer. Say these townhomes that are being built in Canada right now going on the market for $500,000, okay, or stacked towns or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Built into that $500,000 asking price is at least $125,000 worth of fees and red tape, sir.
Exactly. Why is it in the city of Ottawa you can build a commercial building why does it cost in the city of Ottawa to build a commercial building $60,000 in just soft cost permits and everything else, whereas if you go to Elmont it's only like $8,000?
Okay.
Why is there such a despair in cost?
Yeah,
because
so that's
the
a good
bureaucratic
point.
process is like through the roof.
All right. On the pension issue, sir, don't you think we should fix that?
Pension issue is very, very simple. No company, all those funds should always be in a trust account that nobody has access to. If the companies are getting tax benefits for administering these pension funds, then those funds should be protected under trust accounts. Very simple.
All right, Tim, thank you. Well, for a simple issue, it's certainly bedeviled governments for a long time. Catherine in Lanark. Catherine, you're on City News.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning. This situation in Afghanistan, how much of this is Trudeau's fault?
From the Canadian point of view, I would say all of it.
All of it. He's the fourth prime minister to have the Afghanistan file on his desk. The fourth prime minister.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, he's the head of government. I watched him travel across the country, spending my money, running an election before he called it. I listened to vets on several talk shows talk about how they've been trying to get these people out.
Yeah.
And, and then Trudeau comes back with, 2 weeks after I hear this on the news that, you have 72 hours to get, they seem to have...
Well, we're not getting anybody out now. Out now.
And it's a shame. I am so upset about this one issue. I don't know what to say about it. Americans, totally Joe Biden's fault. I listened to a colonel in the British Army that dealt directly with the Trump administration. He said they had all kinds of plans in place that Joe Biden followed none of them.
Okay, all right. What do you think about this banning foreign home ownership for 2 years? Do you agree or disagree with that?
I think I agree. I don't know if it answers the question of why we don't have enough housing. I think it relates right back to governments and their obscene amount of money they want before you even put a shovel in the ground.
Right.
So I'm not sure. There is the criminal aspect of laundry, money laundering.
Yeah.
So that has to be dealt with. Third question was pension.
Like a company goes Nortel, like Nortel goes bust. It takes 7 years for people to get 50 cents on the dollar, 70 cents on the dollar in their pension. Some people die waiting for their pension,
Yeah, they should be protected. They should be protected under the law that the company cannot touch that money, like you said, have it in a trust fund or whatever.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's long overdue.
Yeah, the only problem I see is that companies might not be able to borrow as much money from the bank.
I'm not sure, but I mean... I think about, I can't even remember when Sears Canada went bust. Those people, 17,000 people paid into a pension plan. They haven't seen a dime.
Yeah. No, that's
all right,
criminal.
Got to go. Thank you. All right. Let's get through these calls here. Gordon, Ottawa, you're on City News. Gordon, good morning.
Hi.
First-time caller. Well, I appreciate that, Gordon. How much of this Afghan mess is Justin Trudeau's fault?
Well, it is pretty much all his. The original agreement was May for the departure, and if it's almost like we were cohabiting with the Americans. They had the eviction notice set for May. It's like, we shouldn't wait. If they want to stick around longer, that's fine, but we should have taken action to be out by May, and then the Americans kept pushing the date back. We shouldn't have to wait for them. We just could have done it back then.
Just should have moved on our own. Okay, all right.
Yep.
On the real estate side.
I think with other callers, I agree, definitely. I mean, it sounds nice. It's not really going to help the issue.
It's a supply side issue, right? In your opinion?
Exactly. And, the other thing which was kind of noteworthy to me is with all those fees, the $120,000 to build, it's interesting. That would go against the property value, which means they're going to pay more property tax. So it's like tax on all the fees as well.
Sure.
It's kind of a grab.
I think, municipalities are hooked on the property tax money as well, along with all the development charges and everything else. Okay. Yep. And on pension, firming up pension protections.
Right. I think I may be the only caller to call this out. So I used to work for a company for 31 years, a large private company, and early in my career, they was called defined benefits. In other words, the company was the one who owned the pension. And if the company went bankrupt, we'd all be out of money. Almost every large company, I don't know who's left, but everyone moved to defined contribution. I was kind of, I was given the choice back 15 years ago, which means they don't actually own the pension. They contribute to a financial institute like Sun Life or Maskell or something.
Yep.
So I don't know how many companies are left, private companies left, that have defined benefits. I mean, Digital used to, and they ran into near bankruptcy, got bought by Compaq because, again, they got overwhelmed by their defined benefits pensions. So the only ones left that, the governments, municipalities, they all have defined benefits, but they have the ability to just print more money. So I don't know how many, it sounds like a nice thing to do, but I really don't know how many companies are actually left.
Okay. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you. Okay. Important and interesting note there. I think this is going to be the last call here. Michelle, Ottawa. Michelle.
All Trudeau's fault, Rob. What's happening today?
Okay.
Abiding to the Taliban timeline, we had ample warning this was going to happen. When Trump announced he was pulling out, the Trudeau government should have been making plans. When Biden took over and confirmed that we can't fight endless wars, Trudeau's government should have been moving fast. Instead of having his picture taken, kneeling on graves and virtue signaling and flying flags half-staff, confirming all of humanity's bad behaviors, he should have been trying to prevent more of it. 6 years Mr. Trudeau's had here. He tried to ingratiate himself with the Chinese because of his father, and he was proven terribly wrong. Mr. Biden doesn't have our back on the two Michaels. If that wasn't example enough that Mr. Biden wasn't going to have our backs on the timeline here, all Mr. Trudeau's fault. So remember all the sympathy the media had for Trudeau having to deal with Trump? Remember all the sympathy? Remember all the terror that the radical Islamic groups were wreaking on the globe? Now, will we be going back to all that? And most of all, remember how incompetent Mr. Trudeau is. His little advertisement where Trudeau runs says, let's keep moving forward and leave no one behind. Tell that to everybody today in Afghanistan, Mr. Trudeau.
Right, okay, we're right out of time. Got to go. Thank you. I wish I could ask you about the other two, but that's our time. News is coming up, and then we'll talk about some local issues. Coming up, Matt Skof is the president of the Ottawa Police Association. Talk about vaccine mandates for frontline police officers. Not getting much resistance from frontline police officers, rank-and-file police officers in our city. And that's coming right up. And in addition to Matt Skof of the Ottawa Police Association, Dr. Robert Cushman, yes, acting medical officer of Health, Renfrew County District Health Unit vaccine passports. Ask him about that. And then after the 11:30 news, it's very good timing. The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. It's all ahead on City News.
This hour of
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 26th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Under the heat warning in Ottawa and in Smith Falls, 27, but it feels in the mid-30s. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. All breaking news from Afghanistan, an explosion at the Hamid Karzai airport in the capital. One Afghan man says he saw several people who appeared to be killed or wounded in the explosion among the crowds waiting outside one of the gates to the Kabul airport. The Russian Foreign Ministry is the first to comment on this. It calls it a suicide attack that killed at least 2 and wounded 15. That explosion came just about 10 hours after the Canadian mission in Afghanistan came to a close. A final flight left around midnight our time as thousands of Afghans with Canadian connections hoping to escape the terror included some of those with actual Canadian passports left behind. City News reporter Jamie Pulfer is following a briefing out of Ottawa that was held this morning.
The Canadian military among the last to cease evacuation operations in Afghanistan, an operation that's now officially over. The final flight leaving about midnight Eastern time. The Kabul airport under constant threat of attack.
Every person, aircraft, piece of equipment involved in the operation was pushed to the limit towards a single goal, evacuating as many people as humanly possible.
Canada's acting Chief of Defence Staff General Wayne Eyre says the fact they couldn't rescue everyone who was so desperate to leave is heartbreaking.
I know we made a difference in thousands of lives while we were there, and every one of those lives counts as a win. We'll see if that's enough.
Thousands of Canadian expats and Afghans who helped our military during the 10-year mission in Afghanistan have been left behind. Canada was able to evacuate about 3,700 people from the country that fell to the Taliban earlier this month. I'm Jamie Pulfer.
Now, the Prime Minister is defending his government's actions in Afghanistan as the military evacuation effort came to a close. With more from the campaign trail of Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, here is City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
This is a very difficult day.
Prime Minister and Liberal leader Justin Trudeau at a stop in Quebec City says his government has done all it can to help the thousands of people looking to flee Afghanistan with the Taliban now taking over. He defends the speed at which the feds acted and says the evacuation efforts are not over and Canada is continuing to work with regional and international partners.
To do everything we can, both to bring tens of thousands of Afghans with their families to Canada, but also to keep putting pressure on the Taliban to ensure that people can leave.
Other party leaders have criticized the government for not moving quicker and not devoting more resources to help. The acting Chief of Defence Staff, Wayne Eyre, earlier addressed some of the criticisms, saying that they were misinformed and not aware of what was happening on the ground. Aside from Afghanistan, the Liberals promising to give more supports to seniors. Conservatives will be making an announcement in Ottawa, and the NDP is in Winnipeg to talk housing. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:04. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Mainly sunny, hot, humid for us today. The high 32 degrees will feel like 40. Slight chance of a shower tonight, cooler low near 16. And tomorrow, sun and cloud, a fresher feel near 24. For today, the high near 32.
And right now, under a heat warning, 27 degrees in Ottawa and Smith Falls. It does feel in the mid-30s. 678, that's the number of new cases of COVID in Ontario today, and 15 of those cases are in Ottawa, 10 of them in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. One is in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and none in Renfrew. The province reporting no additional deaths. Now, there is a growing call for vaccine passports to be issued by the province. More on this issue coming up in moments on The Rob Snow Show. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Matt Skof is with me. He is the president of the Ottawa Police Association. Good morning, Mr. Skof. Welcome back.
Good morning, Rob. Thank you very much for having me on again.
Very nice to hear from you. What is the position of the Ottawa Police Association on mandatory vaccines for police officers?
Well, Rob, if I could actually start off with something, I think we need to move away from this term mandatory.
Okay.
It's counterproductive, it's heavy-handed, and it's not accurate. There is no concept here of mandatory. Mandatory is forced. This is a requirement from an employer. It's a labor issue. There is an authority with the employer to provide a bona fide occupational requirement. And in this case, they're stating that vaccines, just like hepatitis B vaccines or something of this nature, is required before you return to work. And again, what is being missed and whispered only afterwards is a requirement for the employer to provide an avenue around medical exemptions. And it seems to be secondary and it seems to be missed, but yet it's critical that the employer recognize this within the membership. And again, fair to Ottawa, they are, but it seems to be lost in the conversation that it's always turning to this term mandatory. We do not have any setup or system in Canada of anything that is mandatory. This is a work requirement, and that's where it remains in a labor context.
Okay. Nevertheless, what are you hearing from your members about the need to be vaccinated as a job requirement?
Right, as a job requirement, right. And right now, and this is more of an estimation with the majority of it being factual statistically, we figure we're around, in total, the organization's almost at 90%. So right now, the conversation is revolving around the 10% that aren't. And at a 90% vaccination rate, and again, I use the term vaccination within the context of what this is, I think the issue is already mitigated, strongly mitigated within the Ottawa Police Service. The conversation around those that have a medical issue or those that choose not to, the pathway for them to return to work or to go to work productively and comfortably is where I'm focusing our energies on, and is where our members require us or need us to focus our energies on, because whether it's a medical exemption or somebody who is consciously choosing not to, which I fully respect, the conversations I'm having with the employer are focused on how are we going to have these people return to work productively? What is the mechanisms that are going to be engaged? Is it daily testing? Is it once a week, twice a week, et cetera? Where is that occurring? That's where the members need us to focus our energies on.
Okay. So it is not a source of friction within the policing community here in Ottawa. Is that fair to say?
I would say that on a whole. Obviously, there will be people that have a strong opinion on it, and I think that's because the rhetoric within, the I don't want to say the media. This is not a media issue, but within the conversations that are occurring, those that have a very strong opinion on it, yes, it creates. There is divisiveness that is created by it, but ultimately, I think from the association perspective, and credit to the employer, we've had very productive conversations during this entire pandemic. There's been rarely an issue where we've had to exert any sort of influence from a labor perspective and state that you're about to cross the line from a labor law, and I use the term very loosely there, but it's been rare because this has been a very difficult situation. Everybody understands the context of we need to work together on this. We want to have a productive, healthy work environment for our members. So ultimately, I would say it's not that caustic within the culture, within the service. But once the terms mandatory get thrown out, of course you're going to have this visceral reaction to it.
Right. Some people are going to push back against that. Yeah. Some people are going to push back against that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And how would you describe, just on the need to be vaccinated, how would you describe the discussions between your members and the employer, the police service?
I would say the service is handling it quite well. They're encouraging members to be vaccinated, and as the conversations are unfolding in the last couple days, we are with the association and the service are discussing how we're focusing our attention on how we have a pathway for our members to come back to work in a comfortable environment, as in those that have medical concerns or medical issues really that are medically unable to have a vaccine. How are they coming back to work? and then those that are conscientiously stating that they are not comfortable receiving the vaccine. And again, I absolutely respect that position. How are they coming back to work? To me, it is the same category. So whether it's, by choice or by medical condition, to me, that is one category of person. We're at 90% already. So let's focus our efforts on how we can have our members be productive, not feel threatened. And I think the service is of the same mindset, because it is counterproductive when you have a sort of that threatening terminology of mandatory.
Okay. How would you describe the uptake among your members for getting vaccinated? Do you have, the rates in the city among the general population are quite impressive, and I'm just wondering, among our rank and file police officers and other OPS staff members, if it's the same sort of thing.
I would say it's quite high, the uptick on receiving the vaccination, and I think we've probably come to a saturation point in around the 90%. We might see another % or two upwards, but I think, when you're looking at those numbers, and I think that's quite beyond, I'd say that's probably a good 10% beyond general society. I'd say the uptick is quite high on receiving it. And then I think at some point, I think you've reached a sort of a line where you're not going to receive more, or you're not going to see more numbers, the numbers climbing anymore. And at this point, I think we're probably close to it. I mean, say with another percentage or two, but so let's say we end up with 10 or 8% who are not receiving vaccines for whatever reason. I think that's, the efforts that we could choose our efforts at this point. We could say, are we going to have the battles with the employer, with our members who are saying, I do not want to come to work. I don't want to be forced, using quotations around that. I don't want to be forced to receive the vaccine. Or we can choose to make our efforts on with the employer, and I think they're agreeable to this, on let's look at the category of those that are medically unable to receive it and have those that are philosophically not going to receive it. And again, respecting that decision, let us have that category of people that are within, let's say, a 10% range of the membership, and let's find that pathway or the process for them to come to work. Because quite frankly, just from a practical perspective, if there is no pathway or there's no resolution on how we have people come back to work, 10%, that would be unmanageable operationally if 10% of people weren't able to come back to work.
In terms of the other issues surrounding just keeping OPS officers safe, OPS staff safe, in terms of, PPE, gloves, masks, whatever, the facilities, the vehicles. Do you feel all of that is adequate right now, Mr. Skof?
Originally, it was very taxing. It was trying, it was troubling, it was, you name it. There was so many changes that were occurring, different stats came out, different reports came out around the efficacies around which product to use. I think that settled. In it settled down, it became more consistent. There was more consensus on what products to use, how to mitigate, what were the proper, for example, spacing. One of our biggest issues was our comm center. Our communications center doesn't have the option of spreading out. There's a very fixed, limited space. I'd say, from a practical perspective, again, our comm center was the most taxed on this one.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately, yes. And they're still in that scenario where, the consoles are set up already in place. You can't just move them and pick them up and move them. They're not portable. So that is one area where I'd say our membership suffered greatly in that environment, where having to wear shields, having plexiglass around them because those consoles are fixed. So, and the space is limited, of course, ventilation, temperature, comfort, very difficult environment for our comm center. And then our members on the road going front line, cell block, all of those, as the months, because originally we had PPE issues. We couldn't get the N95 mask, right? And then they moved from the N95 into the cloth mask concept, which alleviated a lot of the supply issues. And now, our members who are frontline going out to a call for service, they have a proper respirator mask that they wear. So I'd say that has settled. I mean, of course, there's always room to be. There's always in this environment, you must always remain vigilant And I'd say the organization is consistent in its vigilance on that issue.
Thank you for your time this morning. It's greatly appreciated.
And thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks. And again, thank you for the work of our police officers in Ottawa and your members, Matt Skof. Thank you again for the time. Okay, coming up next, Dr. Robert Cushman, Acting Medical Officer of Health for Renfrew County and the District Health Unit up there, up the line. We'll get the latest on Ontario Medical Officer of Health and supporting a vaccine passport at the local level if the province doesn't come up with one of its own. We'll ask Dr. Cushman about that. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store, a popcorn machine was in there, he didn't want it, I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use the exact words. But anyway, we started and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. It sometimes people, you know, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay, let's talk vaccine passports, maybe not at the provincial level. How about the local level? Dr. Robert Cushman is here. He's Acting Medical Officer of Health, Renfrew County and District Health Unit. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, very nice to hear from you. So I was reading this morning your colleague at the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, Dr. Paul Remiliotis, says if the province doesn't do it, maybe local health units may go their own way on vaccine passports or a vaccine certificate or an app or whatever the case might be. What do you think about that, Dr. Cushman?
Well, first of all, I think a vaccine passport is really important. I mean, for our health, for our hospitals, for our jobs, for our economy, for customers, for school children, for our social lives. We want to go to a hockey game or something. Extremely important. and that's the why. So this is all good news. This has been gaining momentum, as you know. Quebec has done it. British Columbia has done it. We're seeing it in a lot of businesses, organizations, schools, colleges, even townships are considering this. So it's a matter of building on this momentum to get it done Ontario-wide. Now, the government is reluctant to do this, and I understand that. So my understanding from talking to Dr. Paul and looking at the structure of the Health Protection Act and some of the COVID measures, that there are 5 major health regions, not 14 LHINs, but now 5 major health regions in Ontario. And we could go region by region, and if need be. But in the meantime, we're advocating and encouraging the province to do the right thing for the right reasons.
Yeah. For example, one of the questions that I would have is, say in your health unit, what resources would you have? You wouldn't want a scenario where, the Renfrew District Health Unit has its own vaccine passport, for example. You'd rather pool your resources or share your resources and try and, streamline things with your colleagues across the province, wouldn't you, Dr. Cushman?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it would be ridiculous to
ridiculous.
do it.
Yeah.
Because there's so much movement. People are so mobile in Ontario in terms of where they live, where they play, where they work, where they go to school.
Right.
So the 5 Ontario health regions, it's interesting. They're more than the sort of Champlain-Lynn. Ours would sort of touch on a bit of Scarborough. So it would include Peterborough, Kingston, Hawkesbury, Ottawa, Cornwall, Deep River. There you go. So it would be quite large. I mean, even if we did that, we'd like to have the other 4 regions doing it at the same time. So this is important. But again, we're advocating, and we hope the government will do the right thing. I don't think this is a vote loser, frankly. I mean, I think 4 out of 5 people in Ontario want this.
Okay. How would you describe the current situation in your health unit with COVID-19 right now, Doctor?
Okay, so we're having probably 3 or 4 cases a week, but you probably noticed that Ontario's had trouble the last week. The cases are building, and invariably we're 2 weeks behind Ontario. So we're probably going to get into trouble after Labor Day, and that's, of course, when the schools get into more trouble, so to speak, after Labor Day. And that's when the schools are back, and this is another reason why this is really important. So there is an urgency here because we know last time I looked, there were 17,000 unvaccinated people in Renfrew County who are eligible, and then another 12,000 who are these kids under the age of 12 who are ineligible. So that's nearly 30,000 people, and boy, that's plenty of activity. That's a big pool of the population for the Delta variant to work on, and that's why we can get into trouble, and that's why we really need to encourage to get the vaccination level well beyond the 82% that we're standing at now. And I think what they've noticed from British Columbia and other places that once you do this, the hesitant tend to show up and roll up their sleeve. I mean, there is a certain hardcore anti-vax crowd, but I think they're sort of 5% at the most. Yeah. I mean, what we're dealing with now are poor access and hesitancy. And if we make vaccines more available and make the options more difficult when you're not vaccinated, I think we'll see a significant uptake.
Okay. Yeah, I look at these numbers every day. Percentage of adults who have received at least 1 dose as of today, 83.3%. This is province-wide. 2 doses fully vaccinated, 76.7%. But it seems that these numbers have stagnated. If they're moving higher, they're not moving higher by very much. Have we peaked? Sorry, Doctor, go ahead. Yes.
No, you're absolutely right, Rob. We have peaked. We hit a wall at 80%, and people are closing down their mass clinics because they're not efficient. And people have realized now that public health has realized now with our partners that we have to do pop-up clinics everywhere and anywhere and any time rather than sort of a 9-to-5 mass vaccination clinic. So it was really easy. There was all that pent-up demand from the slow delivery of vaccines to Canada, but then we basically could barely meet the demand until about mid-July, and then it sort of started slowing down, and then it ground to a halt probably around August 1st.
Okay. I'm going to read you a news story. This is from the Reuters News Service, Dateline London. And as a public health official, I'd just like to know your thinking on this because a lot of us did what we were supposed to do, and we're wondering what's next when it comes to our third shots or booster shots. This story says, and it's from a very reputable news source, Reuters news service, quote, protections against COVID-19 offered by 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccines begins to fade within 6 months, underscoring the need for booster shots, according to researchers in Britain. After 5 to 6 months, the effectiveness of the Pfizer jab at preventing COVID-19 infection in the month after the second dose fell from 88 to 74%, and for AstraZeneca from 77 to 67% after 4 to 5 months. How are we, just as lay people, to interpret that, Doctor?
Well, I've said right from the beginning, this is not a quick fix. Well, I think we're going to be into this, unfortunately, for 3 to 5 years. I mean, influenza is still around 100 years later, and we have annual shots available. So this is tough. But, if we want to maintain our health, get our social life halfway back, 3/4 of the way back to normal, and keep the economy moving, we're going to have to use anything and everything we can. This is a disappointment, obviously, whether this is because this immunity wanes over time or because the variants show up with the mutations. It's hard to say. And this is science that's evolving day to day, and we just have to do our best. I mean, it's almost like, I hate to use a war analogy, but a soldier in the trenches, you sort of, you may run out of grenades, but you still got bullets. You got to use what you can. You got to do what you can. And this is, as I said, this is a disappointment with the mutations and the waning immunity, but it looks like over time we're going to need boosters. Now, there is another sad sort of flip side of the coin to this story, and that is so much of the world is unvaccinated, and we live in a global village, basically, and we have to make sure that these vaccines are not only get boosters in our own backyard, but we get vaccines out to these countries which have vaccination rates of 10% and lower.
Okay. I thank you so much for your time, Doctor. Thank you again.
Okay,
we'll
have a
talk
good day.
soon. Yeah, bye-bye. Yeah, Dr. Robert Cushman is the Acting Medical Officer of Health for Renfrew County and District Health Unit. The World with Elliot Tepper from Carleton University is right after the news on City News.
This hour of the Rob Snow Show 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 26th of August. Good morning, I'm Jason White. A heat warning remains in effect. It's mainly sunny, 28 degrees in Ottawa, 29 in Smiths Falls, the Humidex 37. Here's what's making news this hour. Breaking news from Afghanistan, where Russia's foreign ministry now reports a second explosion at the Kabul airport. Now 2 suicide attacks, killing at least 13 people and wounding 15. The military says all Canadian forces members in Kabul are safe and accounted for. The blast near a hotel at the airport gate took place just hours after Canada ended its mission to rescue Canadians and Afghan citizens from Kabul. A couple of O-train problems during the morning commute. The first at Lyon Station, when the connection allowing the two halves of the train to communicate with each other stopped working. Later, an empty train at Blair had a problem with its heating and cooling system. The city's transportation manager says both trains are in the maintenance yard to be examined and fixed. COVID-19 in Ontario today, 678 new cases, slightly more than yesterday, but there are no new deaths. The province says 15 of the new cases are in Ottawa, 10 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. 1 case is in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and there are no new cases in Renfrew County. 8 days of oppressive heat now, but relief is in sight. City News meteorologist Jill Taylor says temperatures overnight will dip below 20, down to about 16 overnight, and the high tomorrow will be just 24. City News time 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time for The World with Professor Elliot Tepper, Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. Good morning, Professor.
Oh, good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's nice to hear from you. So I want to start with some audio. This is the Prime Minister, as you can imagine today, was campaigning in Chicoutimi, and the journalist along for the ride on the campaign had some questions about Afghanistan. This one from a reporter from CTV News, and let's listen to how the Prime Minister answered this question today. Go ahead.
What's your message to the people who are counting on Canada's help to get out of there and didn't get it?
First of all, this is a very difficult day, not just for Afghans, but for people around the world, including in Canada, who have long been deeply committed to the Afghan people and a better future for Afghanistan. The temporary air bridge that was put in place by the Americans over the past number of weeks allowed us to get out tens of thousands of people as an international community, and Canada will have been able to lift out about 3,700 people. We have taken as much, if not more, advantage of this temporary opportunity than any country, just about any of our allies. And I want to thank the Canadian Armed Forces and our diplomats and our hardworking immigration services people who have made that happen. But I do take issue with you saying now that our engagement with Afghanistan is done, Glenn. Our engagement with Afghanistan is not done. Yes, this phase of the emergency air bridge, facilitated by the Americans until they pull out finally, has been important and has been something we've been in wholeheartedly over the past many weeks. But our commitment to resettle over 20,000 Afghans in Canada in the coming months and years, our work to continue to support people in the region, our continued work to put pressure on the Taliban alongside our international allies to allow people to leave Afghanistan and come to safety in Canada will continue. This particular moment is done, and it's heartbreaking to see, but there is much more to do, and Canada will continue to be there for Afghans and the Afghan people.
Okay. This is done. The evacuation effort is done, but we're not done, he says, more or less. What do you think of that answer on this day, Professor Tepper?
Well, it is a momentous day. This is Thursday, the final day of Canada's engagement with Afghanistan that began right after 9/11 in 2001. We were there immediately. We stayed there until 2014 in a combat role and training role, and we stayed there in terms of training not only local military, but also in particular working on programs for women and children. It's a very difficult promise for any leader to make right now, to say we're going to stay involved with a state that has come under the control of really a terrorist organization that has defeated everyone, defeated the West. And we are pledged not to recognize that regime, but at the same time depend on them just to get our people to the airport right now, which is not happening in sufficient numbers. And then going forward, do you deal with them or don't you deal with them? If you do deal with them, how open are they going to be to a country that has operated against them so effectively for so long? I don't know how we can keep the commitments that we are making.
Okay. It's also the end of America's and NATO's involvements in this situation, and I know you think it never really understood or controlled the situation. Why do you say that, Professor?
Yes, we're at a kind of a moment in history where the Taliban have really, with a lot of help, chased out NATO. Remember, this wasn't just a Canadian operation or an American operation. This was a NATO operation. At the end, NATO had more troops there than did the Americans, for example. But no doubt at all, the graveyard of history, or I once called it the graveyard of hubris, has prevailed. Understanding the complexities of this very ethnically, tribally based society that has groups, 14 different ethnic groups officially recognized, it was never going to be easy. Things were happening beyond our ability to see or to control in an Afghan and indeed a regional way, leaving us to do our best in a situation that was opaque, that was being interfered with, and that ultimately, as we could see, the Afghan Taliban made their deals, made their arrangements, probably with Pakistani coordination and perhaps assistance. The fix was in, Rob, this collapse of the state that we helped build, or the regime and the government we helped build. That fix was in. We never could see it. We couldn't understand it. Easy to get in, hard to get out. Invest in knowledge. These are things that was said in a briefing right after 9/11. I don't know if we can post that on your website or not, but it was foreseeable that we were going to be dealing with a thicket that was largely out of our view and certainly out of our control.
Okay. So you have the Taliban run the table in a week, but now there's this other group, ISIS-K.
Yes, of course.
I don't know anything about it. What do you know about it, Professor? ISIS-K.
Well, Khorasan is a traditional name for basically Central Asia region.
Okay.
And ISIS, remember the defeated caliphate in Iraq.
Yes.
Never really disappeared totally. They have put down roots in any place where there's confusion and chaos and a vacuum, and that certainly is the situation in Afghanistan. They are a breakaway faction from the Taliban now in power, because they considered that group too nice. They weren't fierce enough in their devotion to that particular form of Islam. They didn't. They wanted a different kind of a caliphate than the Taliban have enjoyed and hope to look forward to. So what we have is a breakaway faction from the Taliban that's even worse than the existing Taliban,
right,
which is a terrorist organization that wreaked all kinds of havoc in the past, and are now saying they're not that Taliban, but there's no reason to accept that. I'm afraid what we're going to see is this Taliban currently in power pulled even farther to the medieval interpretation of Islam in order to gain market share against ISIS-K. And ISIS-K today, and we had ample warning. Part of the disaster we're seeing in front of us is so much to talk about, is that now the government's up until today saying, get yourself to the airport, we might get you out. We're saying, don't come to the airport, we think there's going to be a terrorist attack. There was. ISIS-K has committed a terrorist attack today, which further impedes any hope of a lot of people escaping the Taliban.
Okay, so with ISIS-K and the Taliban, how likely is it that there could be a civil war or some such conflict like that within Afghanistan?
Well, don't forget Al-Qaeda as well.
Al-Qaeda, okay. Okay.
Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban sitting here in Ottawa, they're not a dime's different from each other. But among themselves, the doctrinal differences and the hope for power is animating them, and they will perhaps get external support, different groups. So we have a situation where civil war is very possible in the sense that there will be fighting among the terrorist groups, among the Islamist fundamentalist groups who have a very, I keep saying medieval interpretation, a very strange interpretation of what Islam is about. That fighting is likely to continue. The other possibility of civil war is that the effort by the Taliban today to say we are an inclusive government will fail. Right now, there's a definite possibility of something I've been suggesting might happen after the West leaves. A kind of Afghan compromise might be worked out among various groups. So we have a government being formed right now by the Taliban that might possibly include Hamid Karzai, the former president, Pathan leader from that region where Canada had its troops in Kandahar, but also Abdullah, the representative of the Northern Alliance, and Gulbuddin Hekmakhtar, one of the most infamous of warlords. There may be a deal in the making right now to have an Afghan kind of decentralized power and power sharing, with the Taliban performing the role of iron and enforcer. But we aren't sure where this is going to go now.
Okay. I'm just looking at a map here of Afghanistan and its neighbors. You have all the stands, Pakistan, right. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and then you have Iran. For people who couldn't get out at Kabul, obviously, where are these people going to go? And where would they be welcomed if they want to flee Afghanistan? There's obviously going to be a flow of refugees. No.
Yes, there's a humanitarian crisis of the first order that Canada's hoping to play a role in terms of taking in the 20,000 refugees. And the U.S. is actually forming a bipartisan governors meeting under Biden right now saying, yes, we'll take in refugees if we can. It's going to be very difficult to get out of Afghanistan. The Taliban control the borders. The borders are porous. Remember that the last time the Taliban took power, in 1996, about 3 million Afghans fled into Pakistan, and another close to 3 million fled.
3 million? 3 million? Wow.
Million. Wow. And they're still there. And about 3 million or so fled into Iran. The numbers are shakier there. Now we have another huge potential outflow. Some groups are trying to get into Turkey and ultimately maybe to the U.S. It's very hard to do. Tajikistan initially took in some people, including soldiers who were fleeing. Afghanistan, to stand back, remember, is a buffer zone among those regions. It exists primarily because it separates those regions, but it partakes of all those regions so that it has, and the Hazara we haven't mentioned at all, and they have a different physical complexion, and they are Shia minority, and there's real concern that there will be a genocide there. Shias are considered by the Taliban to be heretics. Massacres have occurred in the past, so getting the Shia out will be very difficult to the Hazara. That's up to Iran, and there's no sign they're up to it. So what we have is a probability that there's going to be a huge attempt to flow across various borders. Those borders may well be blocked, and therefore the people trapped.
Okay. We'll be right back with part 2 of this week's edition of The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. This is City News.
This hour of The Rob Snow Show is brought to you by Cardinal Planning.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online. And the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Back with the second half of The World. This week with Professor Elliot Tepper again from Carleton University. You call the Trump administration's agreement with the Taliban a surrender document. Why do you describe it in those terms, Professor?
That's precisely how the Taliban interpret it. Let's keep in mind that, as Joe Biden has said, 2 Democratic presidents, 2 Republican presidents have dealt with the Taliban. Now we have both Mr. Trump and Joe Biden, 2 temperamentally totally different people, actually dealing with the denouement of the American involvement and therefore the NATO involvement in Afghanistan. The Taliban and the Trump administration, or should put it the other way around, the Trump administration opened up negotiations directly with the Taliban, excluding the government of that everybody was supporting, including Canada, excluding the government of Ashraf Ghani and the actual legal government of Afghanistan. They struck a deal, and the deal was, and it was quite easy to do in a sense, because the Taliban's major singular goal is to get rid of foreigners, and here was the United States president saying, we want out. So they struck a deal saying, Taliban agreed not to attack Americans any further, and the Americans in turn would pull out under a fixed timetable, which then Joe Biden inherited. The Taliban saw this. There was also a vague promise to negotiate with the government of Afghanistan on some kind of coalition. And the U.S. really imposed on their neighbors. I mean, the Americans then saw to it that 5,000, under this agreement, 5,000 Taliban fighters were released from jail, and they immediately took action. And that's part of the takeover that we've seen. The Taliban interpret this as America saying, we give up, and they acted accordingly. They did stop killing Americans up until the 1st of May. That was when it ran out, and they were going to start killing Americans again. But they targeted a huge spree of targeted assassinations, assaults on the government of Afghanistan, undermining the government of Afghanistan, while the U.S. then turned over this agreement to a new administration. Joe Biden said, well, look, I'm just stuck with this. I have to deal with this because May 1st is coming. And besides which, I don't want to be the president to pass on to another generation the cost in blood and treasure of the Afghan engagement. So he wanted out as well, and we see the results.
Yeah. Well, he's certainly paying the price in the public opinion research. I suppose maybe that should be the last of our concerns, but I do think about the Patton movie, in the beginning of the Patton movie, Americans love a winner and will never tolerate a loser. But nevertheless, Biden is sticking to it. Even in the, we know coming out of the G7 that certainly some of the G7 leaders were trying to impress upon him extending the American presence there. He was having none of it. What do you think of that from the American leadership?
Yes, no doubt that this, well, let me put it in as dramatic a form as possible. The weakening of his strengths domestically, which is that his team is competent, the previous team was incompetent. He has empathy, the previous team did not. They are going to really manage America's return to the world's leadership and play a role in the world in support of democracies. All of that is undermined by the denouement of this war. They are looking incompetent. They are looking unfeeling. They are also saying, basically, America first, we're going to get our people out, and we're too bad about what gets left behind. So basically the message is going out from America that to jihadi movements everywhere, look, you can chase Americans out. We chased them out of Syria. Remember, the Kurds got thrown under the bus. They're unreliable. The Americans are unreliable. You can't trust them at all. Now they've thrown, their Afghan supporters under the bus. Do not trust this America. They are not really in favor of democracy. They're only in favor of their own interest. So America is taking a hit generally, and Joe Biden politically.
Okay. So the Taliban, okay, you've the clear victory, the clear winner after 20 years of conflict post 9/11, the clear victor in all of this. You've chased the infidels out of the country. The infidels have fled. And you're in charge. But how now does the Taliban actually govern Afghanistan? How does it finance a government? How does it run schools or hospitals or anything of the like? What's next for the Taliban and actually doing something for the people of Afghanistan, Professor?
It's more likely doing something to the people of Afghanistan, I'm afraid.
All right. Okay.
The question of money comes in. So those are two questions. How are they going to govern and how are they going to pay for it?
Yeah.
They're going to govern as the Taliban. They are putting forth to the public a whole different face. We are a different Taliban. They've got a good PR firm going. They're far more sophisticated than they were last time in how they present themselves to the world, how they negotiate with neighboring states, China and Russia and Iran and Pakistan soon. They're much more sophisticated, but they're going to govern, I suspect, as the Taliban. And we know what that's like. We've seen it in the past. Temporarily, they're saying women have to stay inside. We don't want that, but some of our people are not well educated. Some of our soldiers don't understand that you have to treat women well. So for the sake of the women, we're keeping them locked up in their homes. Well, of course, no one believes that. If we're hearing this from the women's groups in Afghanistan, nobody believes that. They said that last time. they're just going to probably govern the way they have in the past, with some tweaks, no more mass executions and so forth. Okay. How are they going to pay for it is a good question. When they took over power last time, one of their prized claims to the world was, we're going to stop the opium trade. Afghanistan is one of the major producers of opium. They said, we're going to stop it, and they did. And then they got into financial trouble, and they started it up again. They now control all the borders, and the borders are trade routes, and they're collecting all the taxes along the way there. And that's worth a lot of money. The informal, I was just reading an article on this, the informal economy there apparently dwarfs the official economy. That is smuggling, and they take a cut off the top of that, is going to be a big source of revenue. The question of what about the Chinese? Are they going to come in now and provide aid? Remember that something like $4 billion a year comes officially from international assistance propping up that government. 75% of the expenses of the government are paid for by others until last week. Will that money be replaceable by the domestic sources and by China and Russia in particular rushing in to take advantage of the possibilities of gaining control of all the mineral wealth and the strategic trade routes?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Professor, for another extraordinary week in this complicated world of ours, for explaining it to us. It's greatly appreciated, as always.
Oh, you're very welcome, Rob. Let's keep in touch and
absolutely
on top of things.
Professor Elliot Tepper, that's the world, and that's the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays at 9 on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This hour of the
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.